send it a tweet.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to Arkio Live. This is the second time we do a live stream like this. Our goal with this series is to show what's possible with Arkio and other spatial design tools, and to showcase the great work our users are doing. Arkio is a collaborative design tool that enables people to explore new design ideas together using VR, desktops, tablets, and phones. If you haven't tried it, you can download the free version of Arkio on our website at arkio.is or on any of the app stores. So today we'll be exploring how the design charrette can be taken to the next level. And we have some great guests with us. We have Richard Allen Foster from Fostering Creative, Matthew Kendall from TestFit, Johan Hanegraaff from Arkio, and myself, I'm Hilmar Gunnarsson, CEO of Arkio. So let's start with a round of introductions maybe. Richard Allen, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm an architect with over 20 years experience. The last 10 years or so has been in a design director role with a number of firms. I'm always interested in the integration of technology and design and thinking about how emerging technologies can really advance the design process and our storytelling capabilities. And with that in mind, I launched Fostering Creative, a consultancy to really focus on this integration, the intersecting points between architecture and technology and storytelling.
So Matt, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey everybody, I'm Matt Kendall. I'm here with TestFit. If you haven't heard of us before, we are a software that does site feasibility studies with the use of our algorithms and co-creation tools. You can go through and make multifamily buildings, mixed-use buildings, industrial buildings, and some garden products, and a couple more kind of on the way. So really site feasibility study going in there and really seeing kind of what fits on sites, and we'll go through a bit of that later on as well. But glad to be here. It's going to be great.
Great to have you. Johan, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm Johan Hanegraaff, working on the product side of Arkio. I'm an architect from my background and been with the team now for 4 years. Like focusing mostly on design technologies and how we could improve the way we design buildings as architects.
Excellent. So first, just a few housekeeping items. You can post comments and questions in the chat box on the right side of the screen. We'll answer them during the presentation or during QA at the end of the event. And also, please let us know in the chat box where you're joining us from. So we'll also be doing a live prize draw for a brand new Quest 2 device at the end of the event. To take part in that, you'll need to fill in your contact details in a Google form. I'll paste the link in the chat box so you can fill in the details. And we'll be doing that draw at the very end of the event. Lastly, since we're doing this live, we'll be doing live demos. That's always a little bit scary. Anything can happen, and something probably will, but that's just part of the fun. But let's dive in. Richard Allen, over to you.
Sure, thank you. Let me pull up my screen here. Okay. So I thought I might start really briefly where this idea came from, to really start diving in and thinking about VR-enabled design charrettes. So last year, myself and a colleague presented at the Aspire conference on evolving methodologies for public engagement. And what we were able to present were two public engagement processes, one that happened before pandemic. These were both with the same client, same type of project. So the first was very traditional. It was what I would consider a high touch engagement. Really, it was about relationships and involving the community in person. COVID hit, and like everything, we went remote. So the second charrette process that we did with this client was entirely online. We had to rethink the way we engaged the public through that process. And we developed all sorts of tools, online surveys, interactive whiteboards. Of course, we used Zoom platforms and those sorts of things, and a really robust website to engage the public. And that brought us to this idea of starting to kind of look forward and think, okay, how can we start to integrate both high touch and high tech for increased engagement, understanding, and inclusivity? We explored a number of emerging tools and techniques, and we really started to think about how we could bring the high-tech tools into high-touch engagements. One of those areas that we dove into was thinking about using XR-enabled tools like Arkio for design charrettes for collaboration and iterative design. So I think we all understand what design charrette is, right? It is an intense sprint of collaboration and iteration, really intended to engage the stakeholders in the process and reduce that feedback loop as much as possible. We've all seen what these design charrettes tend to look like in a traditional sense. You've got lots of hands working over maps and drawings and all sorts of things kind of happening there live. When you get done with all of that, you typically have your charrette pinup. You're taking those analog drawings, putting them on the wall. At this point, this is kind of the end of the process. These need to then be taken out of analog and then translated into digital to be worked with beyond that. And of course, as you look at this, what you have in terms of the views that you can kind of show during this process is what you can produce, right? It's what you're drawing by hand. Mostly these are two-dimensional representations of plans and those sorts of things. Now, when we did the online charrette, it was very similar, right? So we used online whiteboards, but the product was very similar to what we were getting with our traditional analog charrettes. So if this is what the analog charrette looks like, right? You've got a group of people kind of gathered around a table, drawing, pens, markers, paper, those sorts of things. What I think we start to think about is with a tool like Arkio, we start to imagine that our charrette table has gone completely virtual, right? And people are able to engage with that virtual charrette table, that virtual charrette space in a number of ways. Now, of course, we're not limited to just a virtual space, right? I think as we engage a number of different technologies, our opportunity to engage with that material really enhances, right? So think about large monitors that's able to project a three-dimensional view of your charrette model as it's being constructed live, right? You're able to engage via an iPad or other tablet devices for sketching. And in this illustration, you're kind of imagining being able to visualize that model as an AR projected model right there on the table. You're even able to engage via a projector, like thinking about projecting a top-down view of that model onto the table, right? So you don't necessarily have to think everything has to be digital. Like if things are projected onto a table, now I can continue to sketch, right? You can have people that are engaging in that process by hand and drawing and sketching, and someone else can be translating that into a digital format. And then you're also engaging via virtual reality, right? Via headsets and those sorts of things. So a lot of different ways that you can engage with that material live. One of the things that I really like about this workflow is, as architects, as designers, we know that the workflow is not necessarily completely straight and linear, that it is an integrated use of different types of platforms and programs that have to kind of relate to each other and engage. So with Arkio, we're really able to bring in a lot of different types of material, right? So we're able to bring in models straight out of SketchUp and Revit and Rhino and those sorts of things. We're able to bring in parametric planning models straight out of TestFit. We're able to bring in programmatic information from Excel and able to bring in some illustrative drawings using, AutoCAD, Photoshop, and those sorts of things. And once we get done with it in Arkio, right, that model's not dead, right? It's not the end of the road. We can take that model out of Arkio, back into our 3D modeling platforms, and then from there into a number of rendering platforms for continued use. So it is a very fluid and progressive way of thinking about engaging with this material. So we're going to jump in here in just a minute and do a live walkthrough of this potential workflow. Before we did, I wanted to show you just a little bit about the site that we're going to look at, right? So this is a hypothetical site. It is something that I think a lot of communities around the country, around the world could deal with, and that is older suburban shopping centers that have just a tremendous amount of parking. It really does kind of separate itself from the neighborhood. It is not pedestrian friendly, not the type of communities that many of us are looking to design and be a part of moving forward. So really thinking about reimagining one of these shopping centers as a mixed use live, work, play ecosystem. Before I jump in, I think it's really interesting to consider the size, right? So these are often really misleading. We don't think that they're as big as they are. So for example, the size that we're looking at right here, that we're going to look at in the model, that is roughly the same size of the downtown. I'm located in Knoxville, Tennessee. So that is our downtown in Knoxville, Tennessee. A lot of people are probably not familiar with what that looks like. So here it is superimposed over the park in New York City, right? So quite a large area, much larger than I think people tend to expect. So with that, I thought we would just go ahead and jump directly into Arkio. So I've got that pulled up here on my screen. And to do this, the first thing that you think about doing, right, is you've got to locate the site. And I'm gonna start by locating a site in Chicago, just to give you a sense of how easy it is to come in, locate a site, and pull up three-dimensional buildings. Now I'm choosing this just because when I jump over to Knoxville, which I will go ahead and do right now, let me close that. Take back over host. There we go. So this is our site here in Knoxville. I showed you Chicago because unfortunately not all places are pulling in three-dimensionally accurate in terms of height data. This is pulling in live information from Mapquest. So we're able to kind of locate our site directly in Mapquest and it'll pull in the building. But like I said, here our buildings are kind of flat. So I have imported my own buildings that bring up the map data, gives me a little bit better height visualization of what is going on here. So, yeah. Now, the first thing that we want to do is we want to kind of clear our site. So the area that we're really looking at redeveloping is that area surrounding the mall and the large shopping center over to the side. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of clear that space out. And now we really can start to think about how do we draw. And I'm going to leave this up here. I was going to show you live my iPad view, but a few moments ago, this is one of those things that Hilmer was just mentioning. A few moments ago, when I tried to share this to my live stream, since I'm streaming in a number of different ways, I got kicked out of the stream. So I'm just going to sketch live here on the iPad. And Matthew and Johan, feel free to join in. I know you guys can join in a number of different ways. So I'm going to just come in and start thinking about sketching what the new layout might want to look like, right? And I've got some thoughts and ideas about this. I want to kind of keep some of the major roads that are surrounding the site. So I think that's really important. We want to keep our thoroughfare moving through the site. What we really want to think about is reconnecting the site back to the neighborhoods. So, what we're doing here is reconnecting our site. So I'm kind of really thinking about where our new roads might want to go. So kind of do this. You kind of see how easy this is to come in and just start sketching directly live. And you can imagine being in a charrette scenario where multiple people are able to sketch live and integrate and be a part of this conversation, right? So we're no longer necessarily sketching via trace paper. We're able to sketch and engage via the iPad, via the computer, and directly inside of Arkio. Now, one thing that I think is important about this project is that there is an existing Greenway sitting up here. I know that there's a Greenway over to the west here, but it doesn't really work through our site. So I think that's something that we want to kind of consider as we move forward with this development. So I'm going to jump forward real quick. So I've got a sketch that we've already kind of baked out just a little bit. This looks very similar to what we've done just a moment ago. Now, when I talk about integration with different types of technologies and software, so we've done this live sketching directly here inside of Arkio. We can have someone taking that information and working inside of SketchUp, we're inside of Photoshop and AutoCAD to develop an underlay that basically replaces those sketches, right? So here we go. Now we've got our new underlay for this development. We've got our roads in place. We've started to kind of think about a Greenway park that's moving through there. We're starting to think about the Greenway that moves through the site. So now at this point, I'm going to jump down into the model. So I'm going to go off screen. I guess I can keep my screen on. I sometimes might turn around, so maybe a bit distracting. Just going to be straight up and honest with you there. So I see Johan in the model here. I see Matt. So at this point, we've got our site laid out. What we need to start thinking about are buildings and how that works. One of the nice things about Arkio is I know that this site, we want to replace a lot of what was already on the site, right? We had a lot of commercial space. We had a lot of retail space. We had eateries and those sorts of things. We had some hospitality. We had some residential. We really want to keep a lot of the same program. We just want to reimagine how it gets distributed on the site. So I can import in a program that has all of those programs that we were just talking about. This is created in Excel, exported out as a CSV file, and now we can take these blocks that are basically almost like paper dolls that we can use, and we can just start to distribute around the site. Right, so I've got a couple blocks here that I know is replacing the cinema that was on the site. I could start, we could just take those blocks and start placing them on the site and start thinking about how we reintegrate these programs in a way that's more conducive for the type of living environment that we want. Jan, is there anything about being able to kind of import in these program blocks that you think is important to talk about at this point?
Yeah, so it's really interesting that once you have this data in the app, that you can make live edits to the data. So, for example, this giant tower of program that we have here, if I carve into it, I'm able to deduct the numbers from it. Like it's more clear if I start picking up and dividing them, and if I make some additional geometry with different program. Let me just add some office over here. So when you're carving into these spaces, it's updating live the square meters or feet, depending on which setting you have selected. And all of these area calculations are done in real time. And when you export the Excel back out, you can also get all this program data, all these information of all this geometry to Excel.
Oh, that's great. So it works both ways, right? So we're not.
Correct.
Yeah. I think that is fantastic. So you're pulling that information, you're making changes live, and then be able to kind of pull that back out for use in other devices. It's hard to get that when you're working digitally on trace paper, right? Like you've got to do a lot of manual calculations to get that information. So be able to kind of pull that out is great. So at this point, I'm going to jump us to a little bit further into the model where we've already distributed out this program. Give me just one moment to get through our right model here. Okay. Did that share for you? Yes, great.
Yep.
Okay, so here we've taken that program, we've distributed it across the site. So we've really started to think about where we might want some of our commercial residential area. So we've got residential happening back here, kind of the orange, pink. I know there are labels that can be turned on. I don't know if those are turned on at the moment for the view you're seeing. But basically the pink was thinking about parking. So that's redistributing the parking that's required for these uses. We've got residential in orange, kind of mixed in around. We've got office in red. We've got blue in, blue is our commercial, our retail space. We've got eateries in black. So it's really kind of distributed across the site. Now, the next thing we might want to start doing is start thinking about getting into architectural massing, right? We're taking that same information and now we're starting to think a little bit more architectural. So here, you're seeing some of those same blocks. They're now kind of in white. You're seeing some new massing buildings in blue. Those have all been modeled directly here inside of Arkio. I think one of the nice things about Arkio's visualization capability is you've got the ability to toggle back and forth between visualizing by, that is my dog in the background if you hear him, visualizing by program or visualizing by texture or paint. So in this view, I've switched over to visualizing the model by texture and paint. We've started to add in some trees. We come in, we can start do some additional modeling. So I think over here, I might want to add another building that, maybe is a little bit inspired by Bjarke Ingels' new apartment building in New York. So I might bring that over here and edit this. One of the things that I like to do when I'm modeling with Arkio is I kind of like smashing things. I find that's a really interesting way to get unique geometry. So I'm basically going to take myself a new block, and I'm going to smash my building block into it. Now what you see is I've got this new block that has kind of this chamfered top to it, and I really want this to be kind of a courtyard building. So I'm going to make myself a little courtyard here, cut that through the building. I'm going to put that back down here. And let me just edit that just a little bit, make my courtyard just a little bit bigger. All right, and I think I might want an entrance over here. So I'm going to carve myself an entrance directly in here.
The nice thing is that I'm able to see this directly in the human scale. So this really helps in doing that early massing, like where you still want to define a lot the human experience and the spatiality of the designs. like this is really powerful to see this.
Now I'm going to go ahead and paint that blue. That's kind of the color that I'm using to paint my buildings as I get those done. So that's great. Were you able to see your view on screen, Johan?
Yeah, let me share. So here we are. Did you put my screen online, Hilmar?
Sorry, what did you say?
If you put my screen in the video feed for people?
You are there.
Okay, perfect. So I can show here now, this is how it looks like from human scale. So when I'm looking around, I can clearly see that opening that which Alan just made. If I want to adjust this height of the void, I can still do that from here. So based on the scale that you're working at, you're either modeling things with your hands, like Richard Allen was doing before, or you just jump in there at human scale and you keep editing the designs. You can place, maybe make that tree, put it over there in the middle of the courtyard, and check out how that space looks there. So this is extremely powerful, because we could be in this space with several people all looking at the same model from different scales, and in traditional charrettes, that would of course not be technically possible.
Right. Now, in addition to being able to kind of model directly inside of Arkio, we can also bring in, and I mentioned this a minute ago in terms of our workflow, we can bring in models that have been directly created in other software. So let me bring in a couple right here. I've got created some massing models. So I'm going to place one of these over here. Make it really easy to kind of see. I've made these yellow. So these were already pre-modeled. These are little massing buildings that we can bring in and we can start to populate our scene with. So you can imagine you've got either some of these preloaded, or you've got people that are engaging in this process via their computer and creating a number of things. So I've got some little residential buildings, little houses that I might want to populate around the corner over here. I'm going to place another one. This guy right there.
There was also a question in the chat about if we can import models from Revit or Navisworks. So, Johan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so any model that could be exported to OBJ can be brought into Arkio. That's pretty generic 3D format. We have integrations with Rhino, Revit, and SketchUp. So we have native plugins, and we can show them a bit later how those work. That make it very easy to prepare the model for Arkio. And the only thing you would need to do then is place it from your import dialog into the scene.
And the unique thing about also these workflows is that you can bring models into Arkio, and you can also export your work from Arkio seamlessly into these other design tools. And for example, with Revit, as we'll show later, we export the Arkio scene, or the modeling you do in Arkio actually as native Revit geometry. So you can continue working with it seamlessly inside Revit.
So, Matt, I think you are going to take this front corner over here and develop this in TestFit, right?
Yeah.
Is that ready to bring in?
Yeah, let me.
Here we go. Let me place this. There we go. Okay. So I've got your first model. I've got your model in here. This looks great. So this came straight out of TestFit, right?
Yep.
What if we want to make a few changes? Like, I think this looks great, but if I'm looking at this corridor down here, we might want to increase our setbacks, right? And make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly. Is that something we can do pretty easily in TestFit?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me, if you don't mind, I can go ahead and pull this up, and we can kind of go through some of that. There's some areas over there we can change. There's some also areas between these buildings. It looks like connecting down through that park. Some things that we can kind of make a better pedestrian experience. Yeah, we can take a quick look at that. And,
let's do that.
Get into it. Yeah. Okay. Share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so this should be the view that we should have been seeing inside of Arkio so far. This is kind of where we just first initially started with the massings of this. But yeah, absolutely, we'll go in and we'll start changing some things. First thing we'll do is we'll start to adjust the road profile a bit. You can see right now, this is kind of the roads that we had mapped in previously, but we'll go in and start adding some trees, some parking along the edges to help this kind of retail frontage pedestrian space that we have. So within TestFit itself, there's options to go in and edit these roads. I've already quickly done this, so if we wanted to take a look at that, I'll turn off the buildings real fast. You can see that, you know, we can cycle between these different road profiles. We've increased the width of it. We've added some parking, and then you can see some kind of landscape buffers in there. The next thing that we'll start to do is to eat away at this facade that's kind of along this edge over here. You can see it's a little bit tall. We'll start to kind of break that massing down a bit, and we'll kind of just see where it takes it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a bit taller just so we can hold this kind of corner over here. But then we'll start dealing with this mass along this edge. So one thing that's nice about inside of TestFit is we can create these envelope profiles, and they'll help kind of change the form of the building. So I can quickly go in here and define where I want to put my first one. I can define that second one, and you can see it's as easy as just kind of sliding that area back. We're getting a different massing on there. So now you can see it's much better for that kind of view that we're trying to start to frame out. And we'll kind of use that as like as a reference as we start to go down to the rest of that building. But for the shape of this one, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go up to this floor and I'm gonna define a different shape than what we want. You know, we still want to hold that front edge over here. It had taken that one off. So I'm gonna go into manual mode. And what this allows us to do is this is part of our co-creation mode. So I can quickly go in here and I can start to define my own building mass. And then what's gonna happen is once I kind of update this, get this all back inside of those lines, now when I pop back into that view, we can see now we have that front edge back along that edge. We've kind of better defined that shape, and it's still holding it along that profile. The other thing that we wanted to do for this one actually is I'm going to go back into our 2D mode, is take these edges over here, and we're going to push the building back just a bit, just so we can open this side up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this edge profile. I want to push it back just a bit. And we'll do the same thing for this other guy, just so we can open up both of these. Excuse me, just a bit on that. There we go. So we kind of open up this view so we can build something that kind of comes off this edge and it'll work its way down to this kind of area over here. Okay, we've slid that guy back over. Let me just quickly readjust this one over here, and then we'll move down to that next building. But you can see how quickly we can go in and create these new layouts, new shapes, again, defining kind of what you want in terms of getting to fit inside of your site. One more second as I pop this over, and we're good on that one. So now, since we've kind of cleaned up that first view, we'll start going on to the next option, this side over here. One thing that I'm first seeing, just the massing of the building, is it's pretty long. So what we're going to do is in the plan view, we're going to start to draw in kind of a separation between those buildings. We're going to use that using this easements piece that we have. So I'm just going to go over here. I'm going to define a shape. And you can see, similar to what we had on this other one, it's now changed, you know, what's showing on top of that edge, which we can also kind of verify in 3D. So you're seeing it's starting to, you know, widen up this area. We're not putting as much massing, but we're starting to change, you know, what's in that total area. Next thing that we'll do is we'll try to step something down so we can kind of start to play with this edge over here. Same idea. I'm going to grab this space. I'm going to push this back over a bit. And you can see kind of, you can define that angle. You can put in kind of what you want. And then you're seeing it kind of lay out that space once again. For this one, we'll do more. We'll kind of leave this one as we see it. But you can see now we're kind of still building on that idea. We're keeping it kind of lower density as we move up. And then we'll start to modify this side over here. So for this one, still kind of big, tall block building. First thing that we'll do is we'll go in and we'll start adding in that setback along that front edge like we had done on that previous one. And we're going to do similar things on this one as well, where we still want to hold this front edge, but we don't want to take away from that overall building over there. So go into plan view. We'll throw on some manual adjustments. Hold this edge over here that we had previously. We'll drag these setbacks in, remove this guy, and we'll throw on another one back on this backside. So now we have a much larger building. As you can see, we're still holding that setback. We're going to draw on that easements place to it's kind of like drawing in your view corridor, more or less. So it's kind of nice. We'll go back in, draw this easement. We'll still put a space over here. And now we've created a cut between those two buildings, which we can kind of see over on this side. So after we've done all this, you can see if we wanted to, There's tabulations. We can go back and look at it. So even though we're still in that early design phase of like this quick charrette process and seeing these different design iterations, we're still running numbers and tabulations inside of TestFit. So give me just a second, and I will export this model for us. And then we should be able to at least look at it back in Arkio. We can start to talk about some of the things that we've adjusted.
Okay, great. Give me just a second.
There we go. Okay, let me put my face back on.
Okay, this is great. I see your new model in here. Oh, I do really like what you've done in terms of opening up this corridor that connects us back to the park space.
Sorry, I lost my hands. Okay, I found them. VR problem, man. Yeah, there we go. Okay, sweet.
Oh yeah, I like what you're doing there, Johan. You're starting to kind of add trees down this corridor, and I like, thinking about this as really being kind of the green space pedestrian corridor that cuts through our buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Quite nice. Okay, I think on this we're getting pretty well developed here. I can tell that I want to make a change to our site underlay. I really think that this area over here needs to be some sort of lake or pond. We've got a lot of green space. As we saw from those images, this is a rather large park space. So I think if we come in and make that a water feature and start to kind of fill this out in terms of trees, I think that would look fantastic. So I'm going to jump us to the next model here, which I think might actually be our final model. This is me. There we go. Let me share that. So now we've got our master plan really starting to develop. We've got an integration of a number of different pieces. We see the model that's been imported in from TestFit. We've now added our water for our lake kind of in the middle of our park. We've greened it up. This is a huge improvement over the suburban shopping center that we once had. We've reconnected to our neighborhoods. It feels a lot more cohesive. At this point, Johan, can we take this out of here and take this into Revit?
Yeah. So everything that was made in here, including the loaded creations, can be exported to Revit. I actually have it on my PC already, so we can jump right in. So when you export from Arkio to Revit, you can use our add-in. So we have for Rhino, SketchUp, we have a similar add-in that allows you to export your scene to Arkio or bring your new creations back in. What this will do is will convert all the native Arkio modeled geometry to either generic models or masses. So what we're seeing here is the blue buildings, they got loaded in as generic models buildings. They come in as direct shapes. But we can also say that we want to combine all the Arkio geometry into a mass family. And with the mass families, that gives us some extra benefits because we could use the massing features in Revit to see the gross areas, the gross volumes. We can apply floors to these buildings. So let's just do that. There's some massing floors in there to calculate the number of floors from there. And from here, we could add floors. Not normal architectural floors. I want to have the floor by face. So let's just select all of these guys and create some floor slabs. And we can use the massing feature in Revit for what is handy for to apply facades to the shapes. So I'm just going to apply a facade over here to that shape created in Arkio. And by the way, we see also the TestFit building that got loaded in the scene came into Revit here. So this could also be a way to connect various software packages and bring it into your creation. I'm going to put also some facades over here. Let's just declude that one and create a system there. And you see the everything that got created from as props are also placed. So we see a couple of trees over here. We see even like the cars that came in from Revit or from Arkio. So I think over here there were some cars modeled and some trees. And all these assets are families that you can explain for your own families. If you bring in custom furniture, for example, you have your own chair, or you maybe place some Arkio built-in chairs, they can also be exchanged for your own families. And even the sketches that maybe got made on iPads or other people reviewing the models could come back in, so you can use them as a reference to design new floors or other elements. Now, best thing of all of these things is that we made everything fully Enscape compatible. So we can also just start Enscape from here and directly see all the trees, people, cars, like all the geometry that came in, including some of the imported geometry as Enscape assets. Now let me just run this for a little while, because you can imagine the use cases for using the sketches, for example. Like you could think of this as something to bring the charrettes directly into the BIM workflow, because typically those sketches, they never really came back into your BIM workflow. Enscape is almost ready to start. In the meantime, I'll just maybe show the Revit project a bit more. So we see the like the masses, they got combined in here, so that's an important difference. And the generic models got individual Arkio shapes. So that, like, based on how you want to bring in your models, you could also define that how that comes in. Now I think Enscape is done in the meantime, so I can just wait for my mouse to come back. Here we are. So, and let me just double click on here. So we jumped right to the floor over here. So here's that park that we were just in, now fully rendered in Enscape with all the trees and assets that we placed. Here we see that mass that we brought in from Arkio. So as a mass populated with Revit facades. And we even see the TestFit building in the back there come in as shapes that you can use for bringing your designs into BIM.
Now, I assume here, this did not bring in the underlay, but I assume if you had that file, you could just bring that in and apply it yourself.
Yeah. So currently it's not bringing in images as textures. It does bring in all the textures that got loaded. So if we would have had, for example, the SketchUp model with a Google Earth image, it would come in as a texture and you would see that image. We do bring in the 3D buildings from OpenStreetMaps. So that could be also a way to get some of the information into your other design tools. But the map underlay tiles, they didn't come in here.
Well, like this is such an improved workflow in terms of going from a charrette where you're ending with a two-dimensional plan to being able to have fully realized three-dimensional models that you can explore and look at in all sorts of ways. And you can see from this workflow that it is relatively quick, entirely collaborative, and lots of ways for people to engage in this process. So I think it's a really exciting time to be kind of engaging with this type of workflow as an architect. Let me bring this up. So I thought I'd break out what we just looked at really quickly in terms of our workflow. So we started with bringing in the Mapbox located site. At that point, I, of course, brought in my own buildings just to correct for our location that just did not have much height. Removed out the buildings located in the middle of the area we wanted to focus on. Arkio has a great remove building section. I did not show you that live, but you basically highlight the area, kind of draw a perimeter around, and it will erase out the buildings that have come in from Mapquest, which makes it really easy. At this point, we sketched our layout, right? We were using iPad and other sorts of devices. Everybody was able to get in and sketch our layout. We saw our green space kind of cutting right through the middle there. At that point, we're able to bring in our new underlay. For that, really that was done in the background. We took the same view in CAD, had that prepped, so when the new roads were drawn and created, we could quickly make those adjustments, brought that into Photoshop to add a little bit of color, and from there we exported to a PNG and just dropped that right in and placed it on the table. Super easy way to get as a brand new underlay that we can work on top of. We brought in the program blocks via a CSV file. We've distributed those program blocks. Then we started getting into the massing. We did some of that directly inside of Arkio, just working with native Arkio geometry and its parametric modeling capabilities. We then started to integrate SketchUp and TestFit, brought those models directly in. We updated our TestFit model. Matt got in, showed us live how easy it is to make those changes on the fly with all sorts of tabular data associated with it. Then we kind of just continued to develop and refine our model, exported that to Revit. Johan showed us how easy it is to take that and add all sorts of our floors and exterior skinning, brought that into visualization in Inkscape. So start to finish, really smooth process.
Now, this is truly amazing, guys. Thanks for going through this, and it's just amazing to always see the capabilities that you guys have in TestFit, like how easy you can manipulate these masses and then bring them into something like Arkio. Just like, I love this stuff. So very cool.
Very powerful.
We are basically the end of kind of the formal presentation. So it's now time for a bit of a QA. We're about 50 minutes away from kind of the hour. Before we go into that, I just wanted to remind everybody to add their contact details in the form, the Google form, for a chance to win the Quest 2 device. So I just pasted that again in the chat. So please go and add your details there. There were some questions while you guys were presenting in the chat, and many good ones.
Yeah.
There was one, for example, about like how many people can be in a meeting, and does everybody have the same right, and so on. Johan, maybe you want to take that one?
Yeah. So currently, the license of Arkio defines how big your meetings can be. You can start for free, like with the app can be downloaded for free, and you can have a free meeting with one other person. That's like with a limited time. If you would have a license, a pro license, or enterprise license, you can have up to 24 people in that same space. All of the people that are free, so basically everyone that can download the app from any app store, they can join that space that you have with your pro or enterprise license, and they can see everything that you're doing, but they will be viewers in that meeting. So based on your the amount of licenses you have, you can define if your team has edit rights, like which people you want to give edit rights. And if you have an enterprise license, you can even promote one of the guest editors that you have maybe in a meeting. There is a client coming in, you can temporarily give them edit rights in the meeting, and you can retract those edit rights if they're doing something wrong.
So there's questions here about PC requirement specs and the devices. So in terms of the devices, we already support quite a lot of them. We don't yet support like the HoloLens 2 or the Magic Leap. Definitely keeping an eye out for those. We've been putting a lot of emphasis on devices like the Mapquest, very affordable device, can do VR. Great, can work in mobile, you can tether to your PC, and soon it's pretty much an AR device as well. So we're really excited about that. But in terms of like PC requirements, so Johan, it's basically just like a typical kind of gaming GPU.
Yes, right? So it depends on what you want to do, of course, like what models are you going to load in. Your typical AEC workstation that is for Revit is very suitable. It can handle pretty big models also in Arkio. If you have a less powerful PC or Mac device, you can still run Arkio. You like the majority of where you want to make sure that your polygons numbers are lower is mobile devices like the Quest or your iPhone. If you have a bit of an older iPhone, those devices cannot handle millions of polygons. So like that's where we put some limits, so that like some really big models cannot be loaded on those devices. But basically, your devices are your main limit, and if you want to be prepared for the biggest models, any AEC spec'd laptop workstation would do very well with big models.
So we had a bunch of questions about integrations, and we talked about the Revit integration. You can do like OBJ import-export. We have Rhino and SketchUp plugins as well to import-export. I'm curious on the TestFit side, Matt, like what type of imports, exports can you do there?
Yeah, for exporting, I mean, we have CAD files, SketchUp files, Excel files for looking at some of those tabulations so you can run some of your own numbers. And then, of course, kind of working on some, we can get into Revit right now through Dynamo. We have a little bit of a process to do that. That's kind of like our main exports other than just like a basic PDF.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So there's a question, can you talk a bit about the iPad integration? So what you saw on the screen for most of the time was basically the PC version that we were showing, like the third-person view. That's exactly the same as the iPad version. You have the same on your phone even, or on Macs. And in these kind of flat devices, you can pretty much be a full participant in a design session. It's not only for viewing, you can actually be editing, applying program materials, doing all kinds of things. Essentially, even from like a non-VR device. So that's kind of one of the key strengths of Arkio, kind of the cross-platform approach of the tool, essentially.
I think good to mention there the iPad, like especially if the Apple Pencil, like each platform has their strengths, and the iPad is really good for making these hand drawings and sketching in 3D from some of the base geometry. If you want to get hands-on with the model, VR is most suitable. And if you have a Quest 2 or 1, those devices even support hand tracking. So you can even use your hands to model and do all the interactions in Arkio with your models.
So Richard Allen, you've done quite a few kind of design charrettes. What has you most excited about this type of a new workflow?
I think for me, one of the things that gets me most excited is the ability to integrate a number of different platforms. As you plan for a charrette, so I'll give everybody a pro tip. The most important thing that you can do is be prepared. It's like the Boy Scouts, but preparing all of your files ahead of time makes things go smoothly, right? So we definitely had worked behind the scenes. So Matthew had the same site queued up and located in the same location in his test site as it was in Arkio. So that way, when he got in and started doing modeling, they would import directly in and be placed exactly where we wanted. So there's a bit of thinking ahead in terms of making sure things line up and you've got your workflow working, but architects are always navigating and working with a lot of different tools and techniques, and being able to streamline all of those and have a platform where we basically bring all of that into the same virtual table, I think is really tremendous. And I think being able to take it out of that model space and go beyond, as Johan demonstrated, into Revit and then into our visualizations, means that it's not something that we have to recreate. We're not taking our trace drawings and now we have to scan them in and redraw them in CAD or Revit or whatever we're using. We've already got that stuff digitally. So it is a fluid process. It allows us to do more, visualize better. And in terms of getting people to understand during a charrette, a lot of it is about trying to kind of close that understanding gap, right? So what we draw and intend as architects might be one thing. What someone else understands is often something else. So our ability to actually show this in 3 dimensions really helps us close that gap and get to a point where everybody has confidence in the solution. Super excited about that.
Excellent.
Yeah, well said.
So maybe 1 or 2 last questions. So there's one about the size of the Revit files, like if kind of the trees and cars and so on, making kind of the scene we exported quite big.
Yeah. It depends a bit how you like what you modeled and what you brought in. If you put a lot of SketchUp models and a lot of things in Arkio that are not native Arkio solid geometry, we will create families for each one of those files with the mesh loaded inside. So that like depends on if you bring in a lot of stuff like that, it can of course make your file size bigger. If you just stick to the native 3D geometry that comes with Arkio, the props, the trees, the objects, the sketches, the file size is almost like non-existingly increased because it's using very optimized families and native geometry from Revit. So it's not really bloating up your file size there. It really depends, and I think that's with any software. Whatever you throw in there, it will probably also come out there and make the file bigger.
So last question, are there plans to support point cloud data from software like Reality Capture or Autodesk Recap? On this, I will say we have looked at point clouds, like we don't support that directly yet, but we are, pretty, we think it's pretty important to be able to bring in all types of context data into Arkio. We've done like ladder scans, imported them into Arkio, all kinds of like photogrammetry and so on. You can actually bring in like landscape, like topography and so on, using those type of technologies, and that works pretty well. And just in general, we want Arkio to be as open as possible in terms of what you can bring in and also export out of Arkio. Like Arkio is not like an end stop. It's all about kind of just being part of the existing workflows people have today. So
good to also talk about the process that we show now was like we made something from scratch. We basically threw a lot of things together and made this thing from scratch in Revit. But you can also start with an existing Rhino model or an existing SketchUp model that's already pretty well defined. Load that into Arkio, add your small suggestions or little design reviews on top of that model and bring that back. So it depends on which phase in the design you want to use it. But like that bi-directional workflow really helps to kind of make any app that you currently use collaborative, because you can go back and forth.
So last question, is there a workflow plan to show the TestFit tabulated data in Arkio, or would it be pushed to Excel and then to Arkio? So good question. This is something that we need to dig into a little bit more, I think, but
yeah.
Overall, we love what TestFit does. We don't plan to build like a TestFit inside Arkio. We want to work with basically great partners like TestFit, and create workflows that make sense, in terms of kind of these different integrations. That's kind of our view on it. Like Matt, anything you want to add there?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, if they wanted to, they could bring in some of that data with that Excel file, but I think it's just something for us to talk about.
Yeah.
So very cool. It's time for the prize draw. So I'm going to.
Can I enter myself?
This.
No, I'm just kidding. I already got one.
Okay, so we have 31 person that has basically signed up. So, bim, tada, boom. I'm going to fetch a random number from the internet. And it's row 2. So it's Moakir Sankob Jr. That's the winner.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Are you still in?
If you're in, congratulations. If not, we'll reach out by email. This has been a great presentation, like a great chat. Great to see all the stuff that you guys had to show. If you have not tried Arkio yet, you can download it for free on any of the app stores or from our website. And we'd love to hear what you think. Please give us your thoughts, your comments, your feedback. We're always trying to improve, obviously. Thanks a lot, Richard Allen and Matt, for joining us. It was great to have you here with us.
Thanks for having us, and thank you,
Yeah.
Matthew, for joining us. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, appreciate it.
And to everybody else, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.